Today on Beyond the Art, we're joined by culinary visionary Pyet de Spain, an indigenous and Mexican-American chef redefining modern cuisine through ancestral knowledge, cultural storytelling, and deep connection to land and tradition. From award-winning TV moments to powerful advocacy for indigenous foodways, Pyet brings a voice that is vibrant, bold, and absolutely transformative. This is Beyond the Art with Pyet de Spain.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on Beyond the Art podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm been traveling quite a bit lately, but I hopefully get to get some rest this week.
Right on. Yeah, with all that's been going on nationally, traveling is it's a bit hairy right now. So hopefully your travels are unaffected at this point so far.
Yeah, smooth sailing so far. That's for sure.
Right on. Well, so Pyet, your journey began with your family's taquerias. What is one of your earliest memories and most powerful food memories from that time?
So my family at different chapters of my life had owned restaurants in Kansas City. My uncle Don on my dad's side, he had Donnie D's Taqueria, and I remember going there with my brothers and my dad, and we would go and, try the food. And I just remember the smells when you walk into the restaurants, of course, like all of the smells and the spices. And that was something that always was very nurturing for me. And I didn't obviously at the moment realize, oh, these are the smells of comfort until I got older. And I started realizing every time you walk into your grandma's house or a family's home that's been cooking, those smells kind of just wrap you in a blanket. And so that was one memory that came to mind right now, was just walking into my uncle's restaurant and just smelling all of the warm spices in the air from the chiles. And it was just a really awesome experience to have family members that, loved cooking and cared that much about cooking that they put their whole life savings into a restaurant, And so here we are as family members really trying to support them, and we went and ate as often as we could.
No, that's a beautiful memory. Before we go too far, before I get ahead of myself here, would you be able to introduce yourself and share with our guests who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, well, bonjour, Pyet Wetmokwe, and Deshnakaj Mishkotini Bodowadami Endao. Hello, my name is Pyet. The longer version of my name is Pyet Wetmokwe, and I started going by that when I was in my early 20s. On the journey of finding myself as one does. And I'm a chef. I specialize in Native American and Mexican fusion. So I'm also Mexican American as well. And I started really honing in on bringing my heritage to my career when I moved to Los Angeles and realized, of course, there's a lot of diversity out here in the big city, but there wasn't a lot of Native American representation in the culinary world. So that's something I wanted to focus on. And now, not only am I a chef, I'm also an executive producer and an actress. And I really focus on doing the storytelling of Native American stories in different medias and platforms. So beyond just doing it in the kitchen, I'm also doing it on screen and behind the screen on the producer side of things.
Oh, that's very exciting. It's got to be a very fulfilling path that you're on right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So how did growing up between the Osage Reservation and the Midwest shape your sense of identity, both personally and creatively?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of confusion when I was younger because of being someone that's multicultural, being on the reservation. Of course, there were a lot of indigenous people, a lot of Osage folks and non-Osage folks. I'm not Osage, but I did happen to spend my early childhood years there because my grandmother lived there. And, being someone that was part Mexican, and I definitely looked like I was mixed with other things, and I didn't really quite fit in with some of the kids in my class that were maybe full Native, and there was just kind of that, little jokes and snickering things that kids do when we're younger, and we don't really realize the impact that it has on our confidence at the time. And then when I would go to Kansas City, I would also be with my Mexican side of the family, and majority of everyone on my dad's side of the family who's Mexican American, they're half white American and half Mexican. So that is all of my aunts and uncles, including my dad. They're all half, but they all speak Spanish. My dad's the one sibling that doesn't speak Spanish. And so we didn't grow up speaking Spanish, and all of my cousins did. And so that was another thing that kind of set it into me of like, oh, where do I really fit in? So it was a little bit of a confusion as far as identity and shaping my identity when I was younger. I was really just trying to fit in. But the one place that I didn't feel like I needed to do that was obviously while we're all sitting down at the dinner table, like eating dinner together and having a good time. And my grandmother's house was the place of meeting where everyone would spend time. And she is Caucasian. She's a white woman, but all of her kids are half Mexican. So the culture was very present in her home. She loved the food, loved the culture. And it's something that she kind of adapted it on as her own. Growing up in Texas, she had a lot of influence in her life that really brought her in. Her neighbor brought her in and brought her to the table of Mexican cuisine. So that's what my grandmother really fell in love with. But as far as how it shaped me, just being able to be this multicultural person that was able to be a chameleon in a way and kind of fit in when I needed to, that really benefited me in the long run because I was able to, fit into a lot of different spaces. And I grew up with a very interesting background where, it was very turbulent, if you would say that. We did a lot of moving around and we were exposed to a lot of different people, different personalities and different cultures, which is, interesting enough because Kansas City is a melting pot of cultures that people wouldn't normally think of. But I think the way in which that has been able to, and as an adult, I'm able to be a chameleon. I'm able to really lean into my authenticity on both sides of the fence there. But I think as far as like my career and things like that, being around folks, I obviously really love to cook. My Mexican side of the family was really the inspiration behind why I became a chef and now a storyteller of all the many different stories that we have within our cultures on both sides.
You mentioned about growing up sort of between cultures and trying to find your identity in there. And you're right, that does stick with you. That's something that one struggles with or carries with them from childhood into adulthood. And one thing I've come to learn is that food is medicine, right? Food is something that can cross the boundaries of culture and generations. And so, that being said, I think that's something you've said before, that food is medicine. Can you share how that philosophy has evolved for you, especially as you've built Pyet's Plate?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know that there's so much more that I can learn about that very topic of food being medicine and just the medicinal purposes that plants have. And not just that, but our connection to our food. The connection to food was the main entrance of that kind of topic for me. And that was because when I moved to California, I wasn't near my family. I wasn't near my indigenous relatives, although we have a lot of indigenous people here in California. I wasn't connected to them when I first moved to LA. And I was thinking like, where are all the people that are like me? Where are the Latinas? There's a lot in Los Angeles, but where I lived, there were none. I lived in the heart of Hollywood and I was just really focusing on my career and I really had my head down. I didn't have much time to branch out and make friendships. And I got to a point where, man, I really miss my culture. I miss seeing people that look like me and us having those kind of conversations that people of color have within our communities and those jokes and just like the livelihood of my cultures on both sides of being both Native and Mexican. And I really missed that. And so when I started to lean into, I really want to represent myself and my work in the food that I'm cooking. I'm tired of the trends. I'm tired of, doing what everyone else is doing. I really want to lean into who I am as a chef. I heard a lot of stories of a lot of chefs talking about their identity through their culture and through their food and in which they cook, and I was thinking to myself, like, what recipes from my great grandmothers do I have to lean on for that rootedness? And the more I thought about it, the more I was thinking how important it is to represent myself through my food. And so when I started leaning into that, into culture, it really became medicine for me. and reconnecting to my roots, even though I'm all the way here in California and my family's in Kansas. I was able to really reconnect into my culture in that way. And there was just a change in myself and the way that I saw my career and the way that I saw the world and the way I saw other cultures. And it was medicine for me in that way. The more that I leaned into it, the more I was really opening the box of knowledge and wisdom and just how beautiful each story is to the ingredient that we eat regularly, or things that are sacred and special to folks, both Mexican and Native American, and just the importance of corn and how beautiful the stories are behind this crop that, generations have used for survival. And those stories really piqued my interest because there's a lot of healing within hearing those stories. And those are things that have been passed down from generation. And if you think about the plants figuratively, like they are actual healing for us when we are consuming things that are good for our bodies, and we actually become those things become a part of us. It's our nutrients, our macros, our micros, and they can heal us internally. So when we think about food as medicine, it can be both that in a way that's helping us find our rootedness and who we are in our essence, or who we want to be, and those stories of wisdom that we want to connect ourselves to, and then the actual healing that it does to our bodies and our minds.
That's something that my friends Linda Black Elk and Sean Sherman talk about in their creative process. And so
I'm friends with those are my friends too.
We're very lucky to be in such good company, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, having said that, what is sort of the methodology of translating sort of the family history, the recipes from your family into sort of modern dishes, but while preserving that cultural heart?
So I have had tons of people ask the bare minimum question of what is Native American cuisine, because it's something new to a lot of folks. We obviously celebrate Mexican cuisine a lot in this country, given the fact that we have a high population of Mexican people and Latin people in general. So you see a lot of Mexican restaurants, and a lot of folks are familiar with those dishes. But when you think about Native American food, there aren't many restaurants. There are some coming up in that are, here now, that in the US, of course, Sean Sherman's restaurant. We have Crystal Wapapa that's in Oakland. We have a few others that are popping up, Takabe, things of that nature. But it's not as prominent in cities as you see Mexican food. And because those are both of my heritages that I grew up with, and I grew up eating lots of Mexican food, I thought to myself, oh, how can we introduce these two and fuse them together? How can I represent myself through that and bring in some of these cultural stories and ingredients in a way that's familiar to folks that, when they eat a tostada, they know what a tostada is. They know what a taco is. But has anyone ever had a duck taco? Has anyone ever had a bison taco? And there are some people that have, there's a lot of people that haven't. So when I start talking about Native American cuisine, they ask that question of what is Native American food? What are Native American recipes? And I have to kind of start from the bottom and say, it's all of the food that was here pre-colonization, pre-settlers, and it's all the foods that are indigenous to the Americas. So I kind of start there with my recipes and really start to implement some of those ingredients into classic Mexican, cuisine and those dishes that folks are more familiar with. And then I bring in some of the things that maybe they're not so familiar with. Like growing up on Osage Reservation, they ate what's called a meat pie. A lot of people might think of like, okay, a meat pie is an empanada, it's a handheld thing. And I'm like, yes, exactly. It was essentially meant for folks that were traveling, and they would have these breaded pies that would have lots of protein and substance. And that's, what we ate a lot on our reservation there in Osage. And so I brought that into the cookbook, and there's a few things that are new to folks, but a lot of it's very familiar.
Well, let's talk about Next Level Chef. What did winning that mean to you? Not just as a chef, but as a Native and a Mexican woman in the global spotlight.
My favorite part of that experience is, if anyone have seen that last show where I won, that last finale episode, you can hear my mom like screaming. My mom was there and she was like, oh my gosh, my baby, you know what I mean? And my mom has been through a lot in life, and she for her to be there and experience that with me was the greatest gift that I could have ever had in my lifetime. Although, yes, obviously winning that competition was life-changing for me and for my family, just to see my mom like be highlighted as I'm winning, because I owe a lot of my strength to my mother, as a lot of us do. You know, our moms are very special, and my mom is very special to me. Her and I are very close. So for her to be there with me was, oh my gosh, was the greatest gift. And I get teary-eyed every time I watch that clip, because you can just hear the excitement, and she's just like so in shock. And it was just a very impactful moment for her and for me. But that experience definitely changed my life, and I was able to represent my community on a big platform, which I would love to see more of. And we do see more of it here and there. Things are getting better within these shows, these popularized TV shows, to see more diversity and to see the inclusion of Indigenous folks. And there are so many amazing Indigenous people here in this country that are doing incredible work, just revitalizing their food sovereignty and their traditional foodways and language. And so those people are really kind of in their communities doing their thing. They don't really want to be bothered with, which I've come to realize, but there are some chefs out there that are really trying to climb, you know, the ladder and make a name for themselves. And they always ask me, should I do this show? I'm not sure. I'm a little scared. And I'm like, do it. Get the benefits of being on that platform. And our youth need to see more of that. Our youth need to see that you can win a cooking competition, making a sauce that is a traditional sauce for, you know, Indigenous folks, you know. And I'm like, we need to see more of that in our industry. And it was definitely life-changing for me and for a lot of people that I've talked to and seen, and they were really proud to see representation in the way that I represented. And I also I love to be tangible in our communities. And I spent a lot of time with our youth. I spent a lot of time going from tribal nations and spending time just talking to people, telling them about my experience, so that way they too can feel inspired to set forth on one of those, you know, types of journeys. It doesn't have to be the same, but just letting them know that they're worthy enough to be in those spaces and there is room for them.
I think that's great advice. You know, that it's partly why we created this podcast, because we wanted to share your story with younger people or people that are trying to figure out what they want to do and be inspired by the path that you're on. And so I think I think your approach is rock solid with other chefs.
Thank you.
Competing on the competing on national television with legends like Gordon Ramsay must have been really intense. How do you keep yourself grounded in situations like that?
Yeah, it was very interesting. I felt like a fish out of water, as I'm sure everyone else did at the time. When I first went into that competition, I thought, oh, okay, I'm just going to come here for the clout. I'm just going to be here for like a few episodes, put my name in the same sentence as Gordon Ramsay's. And like, that's all I was there for. I was like, there's no way I'm going to like win this thing. You know, I just didn't feel confident. And, but I knew that I was going to have fun there. And so that was really what I was kind of focused on, just have fun and do your thing. And it's okay if you don't make it a couple, you know, if you don't make it till even halfway through the show, at least make it through like 3 to 4 episodes. And so, I was really just focused on that. And I was kind of just like riding a wave of safety, you know, as much as I could. And I was kind of like drowned in the background. I'm like, I'm doing decent enough to still be here. And, but it wasn't until the burger challenge that something happened, and I like kind of flipped a switch, and I really wanted to represent myself again. Here I am on this show, and I'm not really cooking food that I would normally be cooking. And it was like, you're just trying to figure out where you are sometimes, like, whoa, like, okay, let's figure this out. The more that I leaned into my own spiritual practices when I was not on set, the more that I really felt grounded in what I was there to do. And I knew, okay, you're here for a reason and for a purpose, and any opportunity that you get to tell that story and explain what the purpose is, then I'm doing my due diligence as a community member. It's not just for me, it's for the other people that I'm representing. And a lot of conversations with my mom kind of led to this point where I'm like, if I'm going to be here, I better be here for a good reason, not just for clout. And there was a switch that flipped, and I was really leaning on my, my spiritual upbringing, and I was praying a lot, and I was asking Creator for all the answers, and I felt really close spiritually during that time frame, because you don't really have anything else to do besides compete and then go back to your room. So if you're not on set, you're in your hotel room. There's no one else in your hotel room. We didn't have outside time. I'm just, looking at the outside world from my hotel room. So I spent a lot of time alone. So I did a lot of praying, and I just really dug into my spirituality during that time frame. And I definitely felt this very overwhelming calmness that I knew that was there all along, that groundedness and just who I am and how I was raised and who raised me, and those beautiful stories of my ancestors. And I'm sure, like in the book, if you read the beginning of me telling my life, there's a very interesting story about how when I was born, my great grandmother passed away the next day. She got overly excited about me being born, had a heart attack, and she passed away. And that was me, my entrance into this world. Like that was my, coming into this world. And so just that story alone, and which is why I decided to go by Pyet Witmokwe. My name given on my birth certificate is actually Stephanie. And in my early 20s, I had that, coming to me moment, and started going by Pyet Witmokwe. So that's when things really kicked in for me. It was like, your name is Pyet Witmokwe, and that's who you are. And this name has been in your family for a very long time. I don't know how long, but since the beginning of our family lineage, and it's been passed down from generation to generation. And so when I walk into a room, I must walk into a room understanding and knowing that it's not just me that walks into that room. It's my ancestors, it's my community, it's my family, it's the support system in which got me there. So that's why I stayed grounded. I really just remembered my why and my purpose.
In your TEDx talk, you spoke about reclaiming your identity through food. What does reclamation look like today?
A lot of people are curious, which I love. There's so many people that are looking for these unique dining experiences. And I see a lot of folks, chefs and food people that work in the food industry and curators, they're telling a lot of stories through food, and they're doing it in such unique ways. And everyone's journey to reconnecting to their roots and their identity is a lot different. Mine is through food because that's the thing that I'm most passionate about. Some other people's are through storytelling and creating movies or TV shows and series, or maybe it is actual paintings and art, and just finding the inspiration behind what they want to create in life, or the life that they want to live, or the person they want to be. And there's a lot of different avenues in which someone can find their true identity. And I think it just has to do with trying on a lot of different shoes. That's the way that I see it is, I went through life in my early years trying to figure out what I wanted to do as my career. And I worked in a lot of different, places. And when I discovered the arts of, culinary arts, and just the beauty of being able to learn a lot of things by about cultures through their food, that's why I was like, oh, this is it. This is my little sanctuary. I can go into this kitchen. I can really dive in. Everything else like kind of drowns out. And I'm really able to focus and be excited about something. And so that was the step one of like finding the medium, or finding the outlet. And then the other things came with, and that was representing myself, diving into my culture, learning more about what indigenous foods are. I grew up eating most of the American diet that everybody else did. My grandma's specialty, my grandma who's a full Native American, her specialty in her kitchen was corn dogs. Okay, corn dogs or chili dogs with extra onions. And so I wasn't always raised on eating these cultural foods. It was only through ceremony. And those are impactful moments of my childhood as well. But I think it really boils down to the individual seeking the information, obviously, and asking questions like, what do I represent? Let's take away where I grew up. Let's take away who my parents are. Let's take away what color my eyes are, what color my hair is. Who do I want to be? And that question alone, that self-reflection, really opens up a lot of answers for us, because then we start thinking about, well, I'm a kind person. And then when you start answering those questions, and you can start asking, like, where did that stem from? And then those questions, once they're answered, and the sources of those are what our identity is rooted in. And I think that's, kind of like a blueprint of the path that I went on, was just asking myself, if I could do anything in the world, what would that be? And I knew for sure I wanted to cook. And okay, well, who am I? What am I representing? And those questions really allowed me to really dive deep into who I am as a woman, as an individual, just as a human being, beyond my heritage and my spiritual belief systems. But it's really at the core of who I choose to be. And yeah, I guess that was a very long-winded answer.
It's perfect. It's perfect. You've touched on this, but to ask specifically, what does food sovereignty mean to you, and how do you see your work contributing to the larger conversation?
Oh, absolutely. Food sovereignty is the choice in which individuals have the right to make when it comes to the foods that they are consuming. And these are not just healthy foods, these are cultural foods. And when we look at our current supply chain, we see a lot of boxed things, boxed foods and boxed food options, canned goods, and all of those things. And we don't see much of like storytelling happening behind ingredients and where they come from and their origins, and just those stories that I know to believe about a lot of our beautiful, amazing ingredients and the foods out there. But when it comes to food sovereignty, it's basically the right in which folks have should have the ability to choose what they're consuming and what they're putting on the plate. Now, that doesn't always happen. Those foods are not always available because our food supply chain doesn't promote them in our grocery stores, and they're just not accessible for a lot of folks. And our indigenous foods are constantly being pushed out of, off the plate or out of the options at their grocery stores. And that's something that we as individuals have to fight for and fight towards, especially when it comes to our youth and their taste buds and what they're craving. We want them to crave taste and foods that are healthy for them, not that are processed and going to cause them health issues later on down the road. So that's essentially what food sovereignty is. And as far as my role and work within that world, in that space, me just telling the story, my own personal story and journey of how I reconnected to my culture through the food, I think is something that's a lot of people have seen a lot of power in, and has inspired them to also ask themselves those questions, like, what did my ancestors eat before McDonald's? And just that conversation alone really, opens a lot up for people in the world of knowledge and things that they're going to learn about the foods. But my role specifically is really just to inspire people to be curious and inspire people to lean into their authenticity and do those kind of soul searching activities of, hey, where do I get my, my brown hair from? Where does my mom grow up? And what are my ancestors from? What do they look like? What language did they speak? And just knowing where I come from really allows me to know where I'm heading and what I want to do as far as inspire people behind me, the next generation to come. But it's really just to inspire people and to create curiosity in the kitchen.
You've built an incredible platform that fuses wellness, nutrition, and culture. How do you define healing through food?
The way that I define healing through food is slowing down and just taking time to put intention and care into things. And we're so quick and busy to move on with our lives and like get that fast breakfast in, or I'm on the go, I got to grab something fast. And that disconnection is what causes a lot of harm to just society in general, because you are removing that most intimate relationship that we have with food. As I was mentioning earlier, food is what, becomes us at some point. We're quite literally consuming and eating it, and it becomes a part of us. And when you disconnect that relationship to the food and those stories and that motion of just like slowing down and having a little bit more intention and care, I feel like that just disrupts a lot within our nervous system and in our bodies and in our minds, and we're just on the go. And so when I think about healing, I think about just slowing down, taking some time. It doesn't have to be every day. I understand people have busy jobs and busy schedules, as do I, but I do make time to slow down and really, spend some time with what it is that I'm eating, and that little act of intention and care, it goes a long way. It's that energy that's flowing. It's a frequency that's flowing within the food that I'm consuming. And I've seen a change just even in myself physically, and not just mentally. That's a whole other story, but just physically, when I take time to, eat foods that are good for me and I feel that I have a connection to, I physically feel healthier and look healthier, and my hair is shinier. And it's just like little things like that I'm noticing, like, oh, okay, it's not just about eating fast on the go, eating a salad on the go. It's that like nurturing that you're giving back to your body. And then of course your mental goes into another direction as well. And you're able to really think about, what you're consuming and those stories and so forth. But as far as healing, I think people just need to slow down. People just need to slow down, be intentional. In my book, Rooted in Fire, there is a last chapter of the book, which I'm most proud of. And I know it's a short chapter, but I really want to focus more on that last chapter. And it's eating with the seasons. And it's not just about eating seasonally. And of course, that's good for our environment and for our local farmers and supporting local farmers. But it's also about how we are treating ourselves through each season of the year. Obviously, in the summertime, it's on and popping. Everybody's outside. It's warm. Like we're just feeling ourselves a little bit. People are getting, going to vacations and getting tan, and you just feel a certain way during the summertime. But then it gets cold outside, and then you're like, oh, here comes my pasty skin, or oh, my skin is drying out, or oh, we're gonna have to like eat soups, or we don't get to go out and have barbecues anymore. And it's like your food changes, the season changes, you physically change. Some people feel a little bit more gloomy during the fall and the winter times. So there's a lot of things that are changing within our physical and mental. And that last chapter really has a call to action as to how we can take a moment to reflect on ourselves and have a moment with our community, our friends, and our family. And here's a little game that you can play at the table and start a conversation about, hey, what was your most memorable thing that happened when you were a child, or whatever. Just getting to know your relatives, and just refamiliarizing yourself with your friends and with yourself. And that's the chapter book that I like really, really love, because it is a call to action to healing through food and through the table.
I look forward to getting to that last chapter. And I will say, as a Northern Plains boy, soups during the winter are some of my most fondest memories. My dad, my folks were amazing cooks. And I'm all about the soups in the wintertime.
Yeah. I feel like soups are the most underrated food out there. Like if you think about it, for all the cuisines, it's like so much flavor, depth, nutrition. It's the best.
Absolutely. When you think about representation in the culinary world, what barriers still need breaking?
Oh my goodness, man. When I talk about curriculums, it's curriculums. I remember going through culinary school, not seeing any representation or story about indigenous food systems and how they have shaped our current food systems. Like that entire teaching is missing. That's why people like Sean Sherman is so important, because the work that he does is very academia based, and hopefully his new book, shout out Sean Sherman, his new book, Turtle Island, it really is kind of I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like a textbook, right? And it's really him introducing these foods to the world and letting people know, hey, like this education exists here. I have it in a book. And the same with my book. There's some beautiful storytelling. Our books are very different. Mine is more, me and my story, and more of my introduction to the world is the way that I saw this book being for me. And his is very educational. And if we could utilize stories like both of these in the culinary world, where we're inspiring our youth that, hey, these other chefs that have come before us that are all French, and they put in the French Brigade system and the mother sauces and the mise en place and all these terms, those are great structures for teaching folks about structure in the kitchen and safety in the kitchen, which is amazing. But we also need to let them understand that there's more than just good French food, and you don't have to just only know about French food and French cuisine and French techniques in order to be a good chef. And that's what I was taught was if you know them other sauces by heart and you can make them from scratch, you're going to be a good chef. Or these are the things that you need to know. And it was all based around, French cuisine. And to an extent, it's great, good structure. I'm glad it exists, but I also wish I would have seen more representation of indigenous people in the regional foods of Americas. I didn't see much in there about our agricultural and planting methods and any of that. So when we talk about what needs work, it's the curriculums in our culinary schools.
Well, and this is what I'm about to say is sort of like a freshman level observation, but so much of European cuisine was influenced by indigenous foods in the first place. I mean, half of Italian foods would not have their identity now if it weren't for us.
I'm like, Italians made tomatoes their whole identity, and it was not even native to their landscapes. It's like, can we just get some representation on that side of the fence, please?
Yep. So what role does community play in your process? Do you think of yourself as feeding the people's bodies or their spirits first?
I definitely think of spirits first. I'm someone that just like loves a good vibe. I love a good dinner and creating those memories at the table, because that was very instrumental to me and my growth and who I am as from a child to now as an adult. And I love hosting, and I just really want people to feel happy after they eat, and to spend time with each other. And I've done a lot of reading. There's a book that's called The Life Stages of Native American Women from Kim Anderson. And she really talks about as women, as indigenous women, and not just women. It doesn't just focus on women. It kind of focuses on all of our roles at one point within our tribal systems. And there was a role that women played, and they would all like kind of spend time together washing their clothes. It was a weekly event that would happen before new machinery came in and was introduced from the settlers that came here. All the women would gather all the clothing from each of their families, and they would go to the river and they would wash their clothes together. And I know this is like, we're talking about washing clothes and cooking, but if you think about it, they're both things that are chores, quote unquote, a chore that the women are doing. But during this time frame of them washing clothes together, they were just talking and like doing their auntie cackles or whatever, and they're just like really like just having a good time. And it was something that they did weekly and they looked forward to it. And then when they were introduced to these modern day machineries, they didn't do that anymore. That was kind of taken away from them. And each household then had a different house system and chore system. And I think of cooking that way. When we used to all come together when I was younger, and like the kitchen was where people made their biggest decisions in life or the biggest conversations. Like I remember getting in trouble, my dad sitting at the table and I'm there and he's like looking at me saying stuff, and it's like a lot of things happen in the kitchen, good and sometimes not so great when you're getting disciplined. But I just remember the kitchen being a place in which our families gathered and we had a good time and we just laughed. And it was just a place, a sanctuary for me. And it still is. And so when I think of my approach as a chef and what I do within my own work, like community and my family is like it's that weight, that anchor that keeps me grounded and keeps me going. And we talk about being rooted in fire. I mean, my fire comes from my family. And my approach is definitely feeding people through good vibes, good energy, happiness, bringing community to the table. And it's not just my family, it's everyone in my community. People know when they're coming to Pyet's house, like they're going to have a good time, they're going to have a good meal. And I love that about me.
Right. Yeah, right on. Yeah. Having said that, you've worked with some of the biggest names in food, but what mentors or family figures have shaped that approach most profoundly?
Yeah, well, my initial curiosity for food started in the kitchen with both my grandpa, my mom's adopted dad. His name is Tony. He was a Mexican man from Guanajuato, Mexico. And although he wasn't my blood relative, he was definitely my my heart and soul. Oh my gosh, he used to call me sugar. I was his sugar. And him and I had a really great relationship. And so I just remember being in the kitchen with him, cooking, and him teaching me words in Spanish. And he was just a very loving individual. Him and I had a great relationship. So the kitchen was mine and his moment to bond together. And then my dad being someone that also loves cooking, which he got from his mother, my grandmother. And he really would just like, mix things up and doctor things up. And if he had a sauce that he bought from the store and he didn't like it, he would like add to it and like quote unquote doctor it up is what he would call it, and putting his own spice and his own flavor. And he was really proud of his flavors and the things that he was able to do. And he's a great cook. So those two men specifically have had a really big impact on me, but there's so many other people in my family that have, but those particular two really, like, my dad will to this day be like, well, the reason why you're such a good cook is because of me. And I was always making you try new things and this and that, which is true. And so I do have to give that to him. But when we talk about people outside of my family that have inspired me the most, Sean Sherman was the first person that I saw doing the work that I aspired to do. I had a picture. I made a vision board, and vision boards are very powerful. So if there's anyone listening to this podcast, this is your sign to go make a vision board. I made this vision board and I put Sean Sherman's face in the middle of the vision board. This was maybe a year after I moved to LA, which had to be about 8 years ago. So this was before Next Level Chef happened. This was before anything else that I've, been blessed to be able to do in my life, of my career has happened. It was way before that. I had that moment of reflection. What do I want to do with my career? What am I manifesting? And I put Sean Sherman's face in the middle of this vision board because I'm like, I'm going to work with Sean Sherman one day. And I want to he was just a big inspiration after reading his story and hearing about his journey of reconnecting to food and bringing that into his cuisine and kind of, doing away with the white tablecloth setting. And he was like, I want to focus on bringing these stories back to the forefront. And I'm like, heck yeah, I want to do that too. So I was really inspired by him. And, fast forward, now here I am. I have Sean Sherman's number at my phone. And I just did an event with him like the other day. And he actually came to my house for dinner the other night. And I'm just like, I was so nervous, but I still look up to him in so many ways because the work that he's doing, he's definitely like trailblazing the path. He did it for me, and look where I've been able to do and go with my career. And it just shows the power of that visibility in our industry, in our community is so huge. So I just aspire to do that for others as well. Another person that I've worked with that really inspires me, and I haven't really been able to work with her as far as like cook together as much as I would like to, but her name is Claudia Serrado. We've done a few pop-ups together, but she is someone I look up to. She's here in my community in LA. She's also worked with Sean. She learned a lot from Sean, and she has a very long history with him. And she's someone that I look up to, and she's very knowledgeable. She's a doctorate. She has a doctorate. And so she's Dr. Claudia Serrado, but she really teaches about reconnecting to the foods while your baby's in the womb, and the foods that you're consuming. So that way the first contact that your child has to food, beyond what your body's giving and producing it, is indigenous foods. Because when your baby is born, they want to crave those foods that they had in the womb. So it's starting them from conception all the way through birth to really, in essence, like really try to get your baby to have the taste buds for indigenous foods and not, these processed foods. So she's incredible. But yeah, so those are the people.
It's a great list. It's a great list, and the community that's being built from all of your associations. You've said that you've wanted to inspire people to reconnect with land and seasonality. What does that mean in the world of fast food and fast living?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's tough because not a lot of people have accessibility to local farmers markets. If you think about our tribal nations, a lot of folks are in the middle of food deserts. And I remember going to Pine Ridge, and I was like, one of my friends, she's from Pine Ridge, and I was just like, okay, where are the grocery stores here? And she's like, well, the nearest one is in, Rapid City or something, and it's like super far dry, but most of the kids that we saw coming in and out of this it was like a local like gas station or something.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like a gas station, and they're just like, there's like frozen burritos or like chips and just like all these processed foods. There was no fresh food anywhere in that entire, little stop mart shop, whatever you want to call that. And I was just like, man, that makes me so sad, that this is where all the kids are coming after, after school, or when they're bored with their friends, they're going and getting a Monster and hot Cheetos or whatever it is. And that's exactly what they were holding in their hands, like these sugary drinks and chips. And I was just like, man, that makes me really sad. So when it comes to, trying to inspire folks to lean in more towards that, even if you don't have access to local farmers markets and fresh produce, it's really about inspiring them to kind of take power of their own, ability to grow their own food. And that's what food sovereignty is. And at the core of it is if you don't have the access to it, building a little community garden maybe. And that's something I really want to do that's on my vision board for the next chapter, is to really do a lot more healing through tribal farms and community gardens in our communities. But I really try to inspire folks like, hey, if you don't have access to fresh produce, here's how you can substitute some of these things and have a healthier diet. But it's like really having to lean on those canned goods or the frozen section and try to stay away from things that you cannot pronounce, at the end of the day.
Solid advice. Yeah. What's the story behind one dish that feels closest to your heart? One that tells your story the best?
Mm-hmm. I have a recipe in the book for some stewed beans. So it's basically crock pot beans that my grandfather made. So this is my mom's adopted father, Tony from Guanajuato. He used to have beans on the countertop all day long. So we would be stewing these beans, these pinto beans that had garlic and onions and jalapenos and just all the flavors in it. And we had beans breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it seemed like, and that was like very classic and normal in a Mexican household. And the beans that I used to be the bean cleaner. So I'd have to clean all the beans and get all the rocks out. And he would tell me that this was the most important job, because if you get a rock in the crock pot and it's cooking and someone can like eat it and break their tooth on a rock. So I was like diligently like looking through them, and I just felt like this was like a super important job. So that was one thing that really was a good childhood memory for me. And he used to also say, me and my brothers would have to come in and drink a coffee mug of bean juice. So he would like pour the bean juice into the coffee mug, and we would each have to drink like a cup of bean juice. And we never really knew that was not normal until we got older and we started telling these stories to people, and they were like, you used to drink bean water when you were younger? And I'm like, yeah, my grandpa used to say it's healthy for us. It sticks to our ribs. But I would say when it comes to, recipes that are in the book that really are like near and dear to my heart, that one has to be one of my favorite that comes to the top of my mind, just because a lot of memories were made in the kitchen with my grandfather.
How would you define success today? And how has that definition changed over time?
So that's such a great question, because that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And now I'm engaged, and I live in Alhambra, California. Thank you. And I remember living on the West Side when I was single before I met Eric, when I was living my bachelorette life, and I was living in Marina del Rey. I had this like beautiful apartment, and growing up, I didn't have much. So I told myself that when I become quote unquote successful and I have enough, financial stability, I want to live in a really nice apartment. And I did that for myself. And it's something that I needed as a woman, to feel like that sense of like independence, and that I can provide the life of my dreams on my own. And that's just like what, our boss ladies are teaching us, is like, make your own money and like do what you want with your money, invest, and like doing all these things. So I was kind of in that chapter of my life. And in my mind, I'm like, I've made it. I'm successful. I have this beautiful apartment in Marina del Rey, which is one of the most expensive cities in LA to live in California. And I was living in Marina del Rey, had this bougie apartment. It was beautiful. I have the nice car. I have like this great life, but I thought in my mind, okay, this is what society tells us is successful. You know, I got money in the bank. I got a great car, got a great apartment. I'm living this kind of like lavish life, which no one in my family has ever been able to do and afford. And also just people's, you know, ideas of what success are very different. And some people that have families and are mothers and parents and they're providing for their family and they're in a relaxed environment. They don't have to, you know, sweat about the finances or comfortable. Like for them, that's success. And I'm kind of leaning into that chapter of my life where I'm like, I don't really need this big old, you know, fancy apartment and be able to be on TV all the time. And, you know, that's what I was taught was successful. But now the more that I kind of really lean into, I've gone through those chapters, I feel most successful when I'm in community and I'm making an impact and I'm spending time with our youth and I hear them telling me, oh, I saw you on TV and what's this like? And they start asking questions and I get to talk to them just like normal. I'm not preaching to them. I'm not giving them a keynote speech. I'm not, you know, trying to convince them to buy a book or anything. I'm just like talking to our youth and just being like, hey, like, so getting to know them and getting to know what their needs are. And I feel most successful after spending a time with our community, learning from our community, being in nature. We are so lucky in a lot of our tribal nations to still have the ancestral lands in which they have been forever. And you go to places like Alaska where they're still living off the land and they have an abundance of fishing. And I'm just like, there are still very beautiful sacred places left. And I feel successful when I'm able to be there and for them to share that knowledge and that those gifts with me. And I come home to my very humble abode with my fiance, and we live a life that we love, and we get to wake up every day and make our own decisions and who we want to work with. We're not forced to be somewhere and clock in at 9 a.m. and just dread the next 8 hours until we come home, and being able to have the freedom to make the choices that I want with my own career and spend time with community and go and spend a week with my family like I just did. That's when I feel successful, when I wake up being proud of the work that I'm doing, not just for the material things that I have.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And also to your point earlier of like the community that we have here in the culinary world with like Sean Sherman and Linda Black Elk, like those folks sharing their knowledge with us and being community with them, that makes me feel successful because I know that I can lean on them for that knowledge and also lean on them as friends and also people that are doing good work. And I feel successful when I have those people in my wheelhouse of friendships. You know what I mean? So that community also makes me feel successful.
Yeah, it's a good group that we are fortunate enough to surround ourselves with. I feel that's such a gift. Mm-hmm. Speaking of gifts to the community, let's talk about your book.
So the book is called Rooted in Fire. It was essentially my introduction, or is an introduction of myself and my story to the world. I was very shy about telling my story just because it's a vulnerable place to be in, as we kind of talk about finding our identity as a youth and just growing up multicultural, not really sure where you fit in. There's a lot to unpack in that first chapter of my book, of just like my upbringing, and like it gets very confusing because my mom was adopted and I have like 4 sets of grandparents on that side because I have, you know, her adopted parents and my her biological parents, and I had relationships with, and then my dad's father wasn't in the picture, but his mom was, and there's just a lot to unpack there. And so I really wanted to tell my story and just let other folks know that are multicultural, that are trying to, you know, reconnect with their either their indigeneity or just their cultural upbringing in general. I think we're in a time where people are really curious about where they come from. So this book was an introduction of that, of me telling my story to folks and hopefully inspiring them to feel a little bit more empowered in that mix of cultures. Being multicultural and not knowing where I really fit in was my biggest insecurity. And I was able to really flip that and make it my biggest strength, which is being able to, you know, really lean into those. And when I came to my career, obviously it's gotten me this far, even on this podcast, to talk about the book. So I'm really, you know, proud of that. But the book is the introduction of myself to the world, beyond what people see on social media and the TV. And I was really able to like pour a lot of love into the recipes and share things that I grew up eating. And then, of course, we talked about that last chapter of the book, really introducing folks to the different moon cycles and just to our belief systems as Potawatomi people, as Indigenous folks. There's some introduction to the medicine wheel and what being a fire keeper, some Potawatomi, what that means to me. And it's a very beautiful book. And I really hope that I inspire a lot of folks to feel, and just confident in being who they are. And another a big thing that I'm really proud of is the incorporation of my tribal language, the Potawatomi language is there. So before each chapter, people can see a set of words that are translated in the Potawatomi language. And that's my, I don't speak fluently, and I'm learning little by little. It is hard because, just learning a whole different language is hard in general, but especially one that the sounds and the way that you have to like really pronunciate things is very difficult. But I really wanted to incorporate some of that language in just as my contribution to keeping and preserving our language.
And where can our listeners find your book?
Definitely. The book can be found. So I have a website. It's www.pyetsplate.com. There's a link where it has my cookbook, all the information on it, where you can find it. It's going to be in all the major bookstores that you can think of. And I'm doing a cookbook tour. So I'm doing a few book signings in Kansas City and LA and a few other events. So I'm really excited about that. Also, I wanted to do a plug for, I have a show called Spirit Plate, and it's actually airing tomorrow, which is October 22nd, 2025, on PBS's streaming platform. So it's called Spirit Plate.
Spirit Plate. All right. That's fantastic. Congratulations. That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, yeah, thank you so much for sitting down with us and sharing your story. This was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Joe, I'm going to ask you a question because we talked a lot about me, and I have a question for you. What is a childhood dish for you that is kind of like one of those like comforting dishes that really make you think of like, it's very nostalgic and near and dear to your heart?
Oh, good question. Thank you. I grew up in the country on the res, and my dad was a very spiritual man. And in the summers, in the spring and the summers, we would have sweat before Sundance. And afterwards, after ceremony, everyone would come to the house, and we would have dinner ready for everyone. And so it was some sort of take on vegetable soup. My dad had bean soup. He made this bean soup with his pork, and every time I have, and he's since passed, but I'll have this bean soup here and there, and it takes me back to those days. Not just. I mean, he was an amazing cook, and I was fortunate that after he passed, I have all of his cast iron pans, so I'm able to cook from that. But it's the memories of all that community that would come and have ceremony, and then just laughing till 1-2 in the morning, sharing stories, half of which I didn't understand because they are all Dakota, and I don't speak the language fluently, and so. But just this uproarious laugh, and it was they're beautiful memories and years of those memories. So yeah, that's.
Yeah, I love that you still have his cast iron skillets and you can continue to feed community with them. I always think about things that have been passed down of how many people in our community and our family we've fed with that one pot or pan. It's a very beautiful, and that's a whole other story to be told about our cooking vessels.
Yes. Well, we will carry this conversation forward in a future episode. Would love to have you back and talk more about this.
Definitely. Well, thank you for having me. I definitely appreciate it, and for allowing me to share my story.
Thank you.
Pyet reminds us that food is more than flavor, it's identity, history, and an unbroken line of cultural resilience. Through every dish, she invites us to taste memory, honor tradition, and envision a future where Indigenous foodways take their rightful place at the table. Thank you for joining us on Beyond the Art. Until next time, keep creating, keep discovering, and keep telling your story.